Today, a deep silence had fallen over the gospel music world. A name that once brought comfort, faith, and strength, Jonathan McReynolds, was suddenly at the center of a moment that no one ever expected. You won't believe how everything turned upside down for a man who had always seemed so spiritually strong, so grounded, and so full of life. The same voice that once healed millions was now quiet, too quiet. Fans were shocked, churches went into prayer, social media exploded, but the truth behind this moment was even heavier than anyone could imagine. Jonathan wasn't just a gospel artist. To many, he was a symbol of purity and truth. His songs like Cycles, Make Room, and Die, and Grace weren't just music, they were lifelines. People cried to those songs, they healed through them. Some even said they heard God clearer because of his voice. But here is the shocking part. While everyone else was being lifted by his music, Jonathan himself was drowning inside. Yes, you heard that right. He had been struggling silently for a long time. Behind the sold-out shows, the smiling interviews, and the worship nights, there was a young man who was tired, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Fame had come fast, and with it, the pressure to stay perfect had become suffocating. Jonathan never showed it. He kept performing, he kept smiling, but deep down, he was running on empty. What makes this story different? It's not just another celebrity breakdown. It's about someone who truly loved God, but was slowly losing himself while serving others. He wasn't caught in a scandal. He wasn't chasing fame. He was simply exhausted. The expectations, the responsibilities, and the spotlight became too heavy. But he didn't want to disappoint anyone, so he kept pushing until his body forced him to stop. It all happened during a live concert in front of thousands. Jonathan was singing one of his most emotional songs. People had their hands raised, tears were falling, and the spirit in the room was powerful. But then, in the middle of a note, his voice cracked. At first, fans thought it was part of the performance. But then, he clutched his throat, paused, and collapsed to the floor. The room went silent. No one moved. The same man who had helped others stand in their weakest moments had just fallen. Emergency teams rushed in. His band members were crying. The crowd started praying right there in the venue. Jonathan was rushed to the hospital. No one had answers, just fear. Social media lit up with the words, "Jonathan McReynolds collapses on stage." Fans were in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not to him, not to the man who had saved so many with his songs. But this is where it gets interesting. The doctors later said his vocal cords were severely strained, his body was under too much stress, and they gave him a warning: rest now, or you may lose your voice forever. That shook everyone. But what most people didn't know yet was that Jonathan's collapse wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. This wasn't just about music, it was about a man on the edge holding on for dear life. You see, Jonathan had also been grieving. He lost someone close to him, his spiritual mentor, the man who guided him in prayer, who believed in him before the world did. That loss had broken something inside him, but he never talked about it publicly. He just kept going. More shows, more interviews, more ministry, until his body finally said, enough. Let me tell you, this moment wasn't just a breakdown. It was a breaking point. The world finally saw that even the strongest fall, even those closest to God, can feel lost. And that was the beginning of a storm no one was ready for. After Jonathan's collapse, the entire gospel world held its breath. The news spread like wildfire. Blogs, gospel pages, Christian radio stations, everyone was talking. But Jonathan, he stayed completely silent. No tweets, no statements, nothing. Just a short message from his team. Jonathan is recovering. He needs time, rest, and privacy. That was it. But that silence only made people more worried. Fans didn't just want to know if he was okay. They needed to know what had really happened. Was he sick? Was he quitting music? Was something deeper going on? And this is where the rumors began. Some said he was having a nervous breakdown. Others claimed he had been battling depression. A few even whispered about addiction. The internet, as usual, filled in the blanks with wild guesses. But none of those rumors captured the truth. The real story was far more heartbreaking and far more human. The craziest part, Jonathan had actually been showing signs for months, but nobody paid attention. His friends noticed he wasn't laughing as much. His team noticed he looked tired all the time. He started canceling meetings. He missed a few worship events. He even posted less on social media. But everyone just assumed he was busy. No one saw that he was slowly slipping away. Behind closed doors, Jonathan was struggling with something that most people in ministry never talk about: burnout, spiritual burnout, emotional emptiness, a tiredness that sleep couldn't fix. He once said in an interview, "Sometimes I sing about peace I don't even feel." That statement hit different now because it wasn't just words, it was his reality. He had been giving too much of himself for too long, touring nonstop, leading worship, writing music, being there for everyone. But who was there for him? He carried other people's burdens but didn't share his own. He was surrounded by fans but felt completely alone. Even when he prayed, he felt like God was silent, and that scared him. Imagine being a gospel artist and feeling disconnected from the very God you sing about. It shook him to his core. Then came the guilt. Guilt for feeling weak. Guilt for needing a break. Guilt for even thinking about quitting. He asked himself, what about the people who say my song saved their life? What if I disappoint them? So instead of slowing down, he kept going until his body finally made the decision for him. But here's the shocking part. Jonathan later admitted that the collapse might have saved his life. It forced him to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop hiding. For the first time in years, he turned off his phone, canceled all upcoming shows, and disappeared from the public eye. He entered therapy, reconnected with his family, sat in silence. And most importantly, he spent real time with God. Not the God he preached about on stage, but the God who met him in his tears, in his fear, and in his questions. He wrote in his journal, "I gave everyone my voice, but I forgot to give God my silence." That line, so simple yet so deep, captured everything. This wasn't a man giving up. This was a man learning to live again, learning to breathe, learning to rest. Weeks went by. Fans waited patiently. No pressure, just love. They shared his old songs, prayed for him publicly, even held worship nights in his honor. Gospel artists posted messages of support. Kirk Franklin said, "Take all the time you need, Jonathan. Your health is sacred." Tasha Cobbs Leonard wrote, "The world needs your voice, but God needs your heart healed first." But Jonathan still didn't speak. Until one quiet Sunday morning, something unexpected happened. A photo appeared on his Instagram. It was black and white, just him sitting alone on a bench by a lake. No caption, except for one line, "Thank you for waiting while I healed." That one sentence broke the internet. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And it told the world, without a doubt, Jonathan was still here. After that simple Instagram post, the energy around Jonathan McReynolds completely shifted. The world finally exhaled. Fans flooded the comments with love, blessings, and relief. People weren't just happy to see him alive. They were proud of him for choosing himself, for choosing healing over hustle. But this is where it gets even more emotional, because Jonathan wasn't just recovering. He was transforming. For the first time in his career, Jonathan stepped away from the spotlight. Not because he was ashamed, but because he was finally learning who he was outside of music. He wasn't chasing likes. He wasn't checking charts. He was sitting with himself, confronting everything he had avoided for years. And let me tell you, the things he faced during that time, they weren't easy. He had to face the trauma of childhood pain, growing up in a single-parent home, watching his mother struggle, and always feeling like he had to earn his worth. He opened up to his therapist about feeling like he was never enough, even with all the awards and success. He said, "People see the Grammys, but they don't see the nights I cry before bed." That was the side of Jonathan no one had seen before, the version that wasn't always okay. And that vulnerability, that was the real healing. But destiny took an unexpected turn when Jonathan started writing again. Not for an album, not for a show, but just for himself. Late nights, sitting in silence, pouring his truth onto paper. And what came out wasn't the polished Jonathan everyone knew. It was raw, honest, broken, but beautiful. Lyrics that spoke about pain, about silence, about finding God in the middle of chaos. Now, here's where it gets interesting. One of those songs, written during his lowest moment, accidentally leaked online. Just a short clip, a few lines. But it went viral instantly. Fans were shook. The lyrics said, "I gave all my strength to the stage, but who sings to me when I break? If grace is real, then let it find me, 'cause I'm done pretending I'm okay." Those words hit people hard. The internet exploded with people saying, "This is the realest thing he's ever written." It wasn't just a song, it was a cry, and people felt it. Churches began using that clip in worship, youth groups shared it, mental health advocates applauded him, and slowly, Jonathan realized something powerful. His weakness had become someone else's strength. You won't believe what happened next. Jonathan, still healing, still unsure, was invited to speak at a private mental health and faith conference for pastors and gospel artists. He almost said no, but something told him it's time. So, for the first time since his collapse, he stood before a small crowd. No music, no backup singers, just him and a mic. And when he spoke, the room broke. He said, "I used to believe that ministry meant being strong for everyone, but now I know sometimes ministry means admitting you're not." That one sentence brought grown men to tears. People wept. They didn't come for performance. They came for truth. And Jonathan delivered it with his whole heart. From that moment on, Jonathan began a new chapter, not just as a gospel artist, but as a voice for those who suffer in silence. He partnered with mental health organizations. He launched a podcast called Quiet Strength, where he opened up about his journey and invited other artists to do the same. And guess what? Gospel icons, young and old, started coming forward with their own stories of pain, burnout, and healing. Jonathan had started something much bigger than himself. This is the part no one saw coming. His silence created a movement, a shift in the gospel community. People finally started having real conversations. No more pretending, no more pressure to be perfect. Jonathan gave them permission to be human, and that changed everything. Weeks after Jonathan began softly stepping back into public life, something remarkable started happening. Not just to him, but to the entire gospel world. His pain had planted seeds that were now blooming into something sacred. And let me tell you, this is where it gets deeply emotional. Churches across the country began holding special nights. Not concerts, not revival events, but healing services. And guess what? They weren't led by the loudest voices. They were led by the broken ones. Worship leaders, pastors, and artists started sharing their silent battles with anxiety, grief, depression, and spiritual exhaustion. Why? Because Jonathan went first. Because Jonathan had the courage to say, "I'm not okay." One young choir leader in Atlanta said during a service, "I used to sing Jonathan's music to survive. Now I share his story to help others survive." What makes this story different? It's not just about a gospel singer recovering. It's about a community learning to breathe again. Jonathan's honesty didn't just heal him, it gave thousands permission to stop hiding and start healing. Then came a surprise. Without promotion, without press, Jonathan uploaded a new song on YouTube titled "Still Here." No fancy visuals, no heavy production, Just a single camera, a piano, and his voice. The lyrics, they hit like a prayer whispered at midnight. I lost my fire, but grace stayed near. When I thought I disappeared, God whispered back, I'm still here. People wept. Comments poured in from every corner of the world. Mothers, preachers, teenagers, musicians, they all said the same thing. This saved me. The song wasn't polished, it was pure. It wasn't about sounding perfect, it was about sounding real. And in that rawness, Jonathan gave people something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But here's the craziest part: Jonathan didn't stop there. He started a foundation called The Safe Place, a space for gospel artists, church leaders, and creatives to get real help, counseling, spiritual mentorship, retreats, therapy sessions, and emotional rest. The goal was simple: no more suffering in silence. He brought in mental health professionals, pastors, and even gospel legends to speak on burnout, boundaries, and healing. They hosted monthly worship nights focused not on performance, but on presence. And every session began the same way: in silence. Because Jonathan had learned something powerful. Sometimes God speaks loudest when everything else is quiet. His story was now being shared in Christian colleges, mental health summits, and even secular platforms. He wasn't trying to be famous anymore. He was trying to be faithful. And the world noticed. And in one emotional interview, when asked, "What do you want to be remembered for?" Jonathan looked down, smiled gently, and said, "Not my voice, not my albums. I just want people to remember that I was real and that healing is possible, even for the ones who give healing to others." That right there was the legacy, a legacy not built on awards or charts, but on surrender, not on spotlight, but on service, not on strength, but on grace. Jonathan McReynolds didn't just return, he returned whole, he returned wiser, he returned ready, not to impress, but to impact. And through his journey, the gospel world learned a new song, one not sung on stage, but lived out in silence, in truth, in healing. Because at the end of the day, even the strongest voices need time to breathe. And Jonathan, he's still here and more powerful than ever.